Well, the time is just gone 8:24 a.m. as we continue on this Friday morning. If you have just tuned in, we welcome you to the show, and we continue taking a look after the first week of the inquiry into the death in detention of Imam Abdullah Haron, and we see so much actually coming out already. And last week, we covered the issue, and we will continue covering as. We as the inquest continues and as details emerge. Now, this morning we are going to be focusing on the assault on the late Imam Abdullah Harun, and the question has been: was he assaulted? How brutally was he assaulted? And this morning we're joined by forensic pathologist Dr. Steve Naidu. Dr. Steve Naidu, good morning to you, sir, and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, clearly, your area of expertise and looking at Imam Abdullah Harun sustaining fatal injuries that led to his death. And as a forensic pathologist, you obviously had to piece together what had taken place and particularly focusing on the injuries to his body and how that corresponded to the allegations that he had fallen down.
Yes, yes, correct. You want me to respond?
Yes, please, Dr. Naidu.
Yes. Thank you. So my role was as a forensic pathologist, and having done quite a number of these cases already with the National Prosecuting Authority and the Foundation for Human Rights, including the Timor matter, the Agate matter, the Hussein Hafji matter. So I was in place to do an analysis of these injuries, of the findings, and particularly because in my work as a forensic pathologist, apart from autopsy work, I have been involved in clinical forensic medicine, and I have taken a deeper interest in injury reconstruction, injury analysis and reconstruction. And some of the things that struck me during the analysis included the following: that there were serious contradictions regarding the presence, that's one, and the severity of injuries. When I looked at the in detail at the case, what I chose to do was recreate those injuries on a set of diagrams and as accurately as possible in terms of size and location on the body, and drawing to the scale of the body size as well. And from that, Mr. Gansali, Harun Gansali, sorry, constructed those life-size 2D images that we saw and used in court. And the injuries show the position and presence of those. The diagrams show them, and there was just this frank denial of these by the police, repetitively frank denial, and I could not understand that. In fact, I found it very hard to reconcile that. So it simply indicated to me that there was just more than just a lack of knowledge of injuries, and it suggested to me that I can't exclude that they might have been constrained in concealing and these injuries, or simply casting a blind eye over it. Because my feeling, and as I vocalized at the inquest in the oral evidence, is that certainly it was not on the visible areas of the body, of the face. The injuries were not on the neck and at the forearms. But any observer, considering the care of the Imam, and particularly those two doctors that examined him at different times, would have no doubt observed these injuries if they really looked for it. So one was a frank denial, and the other one was a minimization by the state pathologist, Dr. Schwer, as to the extent of seriousness of the injuries. In other words, he basically downplayed their seriousness repetitively. Please tell me if you and
Yes.
interrupt me if the
Yes,
question
in
comes
fact,
up.
yes, Dr. Naidu. In fact, last week we had the opportunity of talking to the projectile expert who had given
Yes,
evidence with regard to the fall, and clearly it actually correlates with what you are saying, because the key issue here is the amount of force that was applied to the body to cause the injuries that one should actually regard as substantial.
yes, exactly. In fact, it's very difficult to quantify, to measure the amount of force. That's why you have people who have analyzed injuries like us, because what we do is give an idea as to the degree of severity of these injuries. And what someone like me can say, and even I mentioned that even an emergency care physician, a clinician, a emergency care surgeon as well, would 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 be undoubtedly of the same view that these were indeed severe injuries. And in fact, what it does, the lack, then I mentioned this very importantly, and it's an important point, the lack of appropriate medical attention in um, in the last 10 days. Remember that we uh, tied up the date of occurrence of these injuries at about 8 to 10 days before he died. And the lack of appropriate and timeliest medical attention converts something that is already severe to a critical stage. And so much so that my view, and remember, I've seen many, many cases of these multiple injuries resulting in death, multiple soft tissue injuries, not fractures. I believe that had he received appropriate and timeliest medical attention, there is this all good possibility, a very good possibility, that the Imam would have survived uh, to much longer than the time that he actually died. Indefinitely, we don't know, maybe years. And the Imam was only 45 years old. He was just in the peak of his life. We believe, I'm certain about it that there's every possibility that the Imam would have survived.
Yes, and also I think, Dr. Naidu, what is important to understand is, to go back after all these years and to, recreate what had actually happened.
Yeah,
Obviously, it's a challenge on its own, and I'm sure that you have relied
yeah,
a lot on the reports that you have seen. But the one point that came out very, very clear is there was no photo documentation of the autopsy, because clearly that would have made it a lot more easier. And I think you also made mention that this was such a basic requirement which wasn't even done.
yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I felt that while somebody else might describe, and the original inquest described the autopsy report as being satisfactory, I believe that in that context, in 69, in the 60s and 70s, we had a well-developed forensic pathology system. And someone like Dr. Schwer was, in fact, the leading figure in the Western Cape. And he, like the others, would have been capable of so much more. And I believe that he downplayed the seriousness of these injuries. Um, his report was, I would say, satisfactory. There was lots. I believe I can poke holes and make a list of things that I find wanting or shortcomings in that report. The microscope work, the looking down at the tissues on a microscope, which is crucial in this case, I believe was way below standard. And of course, the testimony of Dr. Schwer, the state pathologist, I believe, was somewhat evasive, was, disconcerting in its evasiveness. I think basically what he does was refuse. You see, the, the courts are well aware that doctors like us, forensic pathologists, are there to assist the court to give an idea of, of the correlation to the possibility. Could this be a fall? Could this be an assault? Could this be an accident? Could this be some other cause? We, as doctors, not just the ordinary ones, we're talking about the forensic pathologists, are the only ones who should be able to guide the court as to the correlations to the possibility. For example, in my analysis of these injuries, my views were: is this accidental? It just did not fit the pattern of injury. Is this a fall? It also simply did not fit those injuries. Could it have been the assault? My view is it is typical of an assault, not of a stumble and fall. And assault is or was then the only likely possibility that could have caused that spectrum and distribution and location of injuries in the body, and that's severity. So, my view has always been, we know that doctors, when they are confident, they should be bold in their statement. It's not good enough to say, yes, anything is possible and leave it at that. It leaves the court in no better situation to understand the likelihoods. That's where doctors need to understand, at least if they have that experience. And someone like Dr. Schwer or someone like myself or Dr. Molefe, who also was testified, would be in very good positions to talk about those possibilities.
Well, Dr. Naidu, I must say it's been an absolute pleasure engaging with you this morning on this particular issue, and you've shed just so much light, and you've added so much value to the discussion that we had this morning. And we wish you all the best. And once again, we appreciate you taking time out in talking to us here on Salam Media.
Sure, it's a pleasure.
Forensic pathologist Dr. Steve Naidu, and this was at the inquest of the late Imam Abdullah Haron. And the picture is actually starting to emerge. And as I mentioned, we spoke to a projectile expert last week as well. And from time to time, as these witnesses are actually called up, we definitely will be talking about it, and also looking at the family members whom we've spoken to from time to time. So we will follow through this inquest right till its conclusion. The time is just gone 8:38. We're going to go for a break. We come back, and another issue that we need to focus on is the 162nd anniversary of the arrival of indentured Indian laborers to South Africa. We'll be joined by Board Director of the 1860 Heritage Centre, Selvan Naidu.